What I want to start with is what it's not going to do. It is not going to get rid of the MCAS. That is a very common misconception that's out there right now. That's what critics of the question want you to think. But, no one on our side here is thinking that we're going to get rid of the MCAS as an entity. We know that's not happening.
Hello and welcome to the Progressive Massachusetts series on the 2024 ballot questions. My name is Ryan Oates. I'm a volunteer, and I'm here today with Dayshawn Simmons. Dayshawn, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here to talk about Yes, I'm too.
I guess for you, what brings you to question two? What makes you passionate about it?
Sure. I'm a middle school educator. Right now, I'm the full-time union president in Somerville. So I don't have my own classes of students currently, but before this gig, I administered the MCAS to fifth graders, sixth graders, seventh graders, and eighth graders. And so my passion around this comes from really seeing what this does to our students and their development and their confidence, what they think about themselves as a learner. Over time, students have this ongoing anxiety that there's this exam that's going to tell them how good of a student they are, based on some score. And as an educator, it breaks your heart to see your students tear themselves down over a one-time test. And so that is where my passion comes from around this of ensuring that we are really engaging in a more equitable system for our students.
Awesome. Yeah, to give some background for me, I come pretty similarly. I'm a middle school teacher right now. I student taught in Springfield, taught summer school in Lowell. I taught in Lawrence for a year, and now I'm in Lexington Public Schools. And very similarly, I've seen how it's good to have data. I think we need to have data and understand how to help schools and students. But the
Absolutely.
level of pressure that goes on the individual kid and how, like you said, this one data point weighs so heavily. I'm excited about finding holistic ways to measure student success and find, how we can support everyone. So that being said, I want to transition to talking about question two itself. Could you speak about what this measure does and also importantly, what it does not do?
Sure. What I want to start with is what it's not going to do. It is not going to get rid of the MCAS. That is a very common misconception that's out there right now. That's what critics of the question want you to think. But, no one on our side here is thinking that we're going to get rid of the MCAS as an entity. We know that's not happening. Having this test is a federal requirement. We are not challenging federal law. What this question aims to do, quite simply, is to remove the graduation that is attached to it in 10th grade. So the way it stands right now, to graduate high school with a diploma, you have to pass certain MCAS in 10th grade.
And I wanted to point out that we are one of only 8 states that still require students to pass a standardized test as a graduation requirement. So, it's not an uncommon thing. This is a way for us to change our relationship to the testing, the way we think about it.
Absolutely.
That being said, we spoke about some of the kind of the emotional side of how students feel. But what are some of the other problems as you understand it with the way we currently use MCAS?
The MCAS, it is really infecting certain subgroups of students way harder than others. When we look at our multilingual learners and we look at our students that are on IEPs, we're we're finding this test is not doing them any justice.
Every year, there are about 700 students who meet all other requirements for getting a diploma, but do not pass the MCAS. And if we break down the demographics of the students that are not passing the MCAS, we'll start to notice some patterns. For example, Metro West Daily News discussed how statewide there are students who complete their senior year of high school without passing one or more of the tests, and more than 2/3 of them had learning disabilities. The Boston Globe found something similar, that students with specific learning disabilities, a category including dyslexia, of that group, just 14% of those students in grades 3 through 8 passed the English Language Arts MCAS in 2019. And so these patterns become significant when this becomes the main factor of a student graduating. If a student doesn't pass the MCAS, but they meet all these other factors, they get what's called a certificate of attainment. And this becomes significant because if a student just gets a certificate of attainment, they are not accepted by Massachusetts public colleges and universities.
It is ending up harming them when they're 18 years old and they go to apply for a job. And that one question, do you have a high school diploma? They have to say no. This test is, taking our most vulnerable students and making it harder for them to enter the workforce, to enter and be productive members of society. And you'll hear critics say, well, it's only about 700 students that don't pass MCAS. And I don't know an educator that's comfortable with 700 students not getting a high school diploma.
Yeah. And I want to tie some numbers to this because I love numbers. So this is
Sure.
from Mass Live. This is
Sure.
in 2023. So like I said, I student taught in Springfield, got to tour a lot of the schools there. And so in
Sure.
2023, 96% of English language learners enrolled in the Vocational Schools International Academy, that's SciTech's International Academy, scored in the quote, not meeting expectations category, which is the highest percentage of any students in any school who failed to pass the test. And so when we talk about how it impacts multilingual learners, like we can see if they're taking a math test, for example, it's not necessarily just testing their math ability, but it's testing their language ability in a way that makes the test invalid as a math test.
When I hear you say that 96% of multilingual learners, I think it was, um, that's a failure of system at the highest level. That's not a failure of the student. We're taught as educators that if we were to give an assessment and the majority of your students do not pass the assessment, we have to look within. We're taught to look from within, reflect, and refine our practice. And after 30 years of looking and reflecting on having this as a graduation requirement, we need to move away from it. It is harming students. I understand for some folks that's a hard narrative because Massachusetts has a great reputation for public education in the country. And one of those reasons is around the rigorous standards. And we can have high standards. There is absolutely nothing wrong with high standards. The issue here is the high stakes that are attached to it.
Which kind of raises another question. So if schools are not using the MCAS as the end all be all graduation requirement, what will they be using as to replace it?
I mean, I think replacing the MCAS graduation requirement, that's going to create a balanced approach to accountability that allows other forms of student assessment like GPA, such as coursework and teacher feedback to determine graduation. I feel very strongly that educators know their students. They're experts in their students. Educators work really hard to make sure they're bringing a lesson to each and every learning style that's in front of them every day, which I'm sure that's something you can relate to. And that is far more valuable in determining if someone's ready for graduation than a one-time test.
Yeah. Okay. I'll pose this question to you because we talked about a few of the arguments of the other side. Are there any other points that you wanted, what's the word, that you want to refute or
Yeah,
argue against?
the part that I really want to mention, a standardized test can't fully measure all a student can do. I don't know about you. I'm an awful test taker. I'm a terrible test taker, and I am a very proud president of the Somerville Educators Union. With the mindset we have right now around MCAS, I shouldn't have my job, if I didn't, pass that test. And so the only thing the MCAS really shows us is who's good at taking a test, who is really good at taking a standardized test. And the assessment is better done by the teaching professionals in the room that do projects and papers and tests and group activities, all the things that we do in a classroom. Those are the things that should really, really matter.
Yeah. I'm going to add one more point from my experience. So, as a middle school English teacher, the English MCAS test is something that looms very heavily, as especially as they're moving to high school. I teach eighth grade, so moving to high school, and there's a lot of pressure on students. And that being said, with the level of pressure on students, I feel uncomfortable teaching some of the other skills that are also important, right? The test hyper focuses on a small handful of skills to the point where we're focusing on theme, which is important, reading for theme, very important, but we're doing
Very
it
important.
all the time. And there's also questions of, how can we take a critical thinking approach, and can we teach media literacy? I think if we were to get rid of this MCAS graduation requirement, it would open up a bit more flexibility to teach those skills, but not have that be the end all be all of everything we do.
That's right. And that's not to say that educators are looking for a pass, right? We still want those high standards. Like, as you said, teaching theme is absolutely important. And some other things are important as well.
Well, that being said, my final question for you is if
Yeah.
people are supportive of question two, at this point, it's, early mid-October, what can people do?
So, there are two things that come to mind. So, the Mass Teacher Association is hosting a bunch of canvassing opportunities throughout the state. So, if you were to Google Mass Teacher Canvas Yes on Two, you will find it, especially going to the Yes on Two website. So if folks want to engage that way and talk with their neighbors and talk with folks in their communities about why this is important and why it will benefit their communities in the long haul, we also have opportunities every Tuesday and Thursday. The Mass Teacher Association is hosting phone banking that you can do from the comfort of your own home. And again, you can find that information on the Yes on Two website.
Wow, Dayshawn, thank you so much. It feels really good to be around people who care and people who are out there doing good work. So
Thank you.
for everything that you're doing.
I appreciate this as well. I appreciate your time as well. Like I said, this is an issue that impacts us in more ways than we know. And so I'm hoping that on election day, we can show students that we are here for them.
Well, thank you again, and
Thank you. Take care. It was really great.
yeah, bye-bye.
Bye bye.